Good evening. This is All India Radio. I am Saira Mujtaba and with me is Vaibhav Jyotsna Srivastav with the evening news. The headlines. Prime Minister Narendra Modi asserts new farm laws aim to fulfill aspirations of small and marginal farmers in the country. Prime Minister assures that minimum support price and APMC mandis will continue, says government is still open for further discussions to end the impasse. Lok Sabha takes up discussion on motion of thanks on President's address. Relief and rescue operations in full swing in disaster-hit areas of Uttarakhand. And in cricket, India need 381 more runs to win Chennai Test against England with 9 wickets in hand on last day tomorrow. As the nation fights the COVID-19 pandemic, we begin with a message of precaution to stay safe and protected by following these 3 simple steps. Wear a face mask, maintain 2 gaz ki doori for social distancing, focus on hand and face hygiene. And now the news in detail. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has asserted that the new farm laws will usher in development of the small and marginal farmers in the country. Replying today in Rajya Sabha to the discussion on the motion of thanks on the President's address, Mr. Modi said the farm laws aim at fulfilling the aspirations of over 12 crore small and marginal farmers. Highlighting the series of reforms and schemes introduced by the centre, he said the NDA government remains committed to its promise of empowering the poor and the farmers. Mr. Modi said by increasing the ambit of Fasal Bima Yojana in 2014, claims worth 90,000 crore rupees have been settled, benefiting small farmers in the country. He mentioned that nearly 1,15,000 crore rupees have been directly transferred into the accounts of the farmers under the PM Kisan scheme. The Prime Minister said that the Kisan Rail and Kisan Udan scheme have been introduced by the government to help farmers reach out to larger and more profitable markets.
पहली बार हमने किसान रेल की कल्पना की। छोटा किसान का माल बिकता नहीं था। आज किसान रेल के कारण गांव का किसान रेलवे के माध्यम से मुंबई के बाजार तक अपना माल बेचने लगा, फल सब्जी बेचने लगा है, उसका लाभ ले रहा है, छोटे किसान को फायदा हो रहा है।
Taking a sharp jibe at the opposition's demand of withdrawing the farm laws, Mr. Modi emphatically asserted that hindrances never help achieve development. He underscored that in the entire discussion on the motion of thanks on the President's address, none of the opposition members talked about the reason for the farmers' agitation. Mr. Modi said that not only the NDA government but also the earlier regimes have time and again advocated for reforms in the agri-sector. Quoting former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh's comment about the need for reforms in the field of agriculture, the Prime Minister added that the complete U-turn of the opposition parties on their approach towards reforms appears merely for political mileage. He also informed that many state governments have already implemented similar agri-reforms under their administration. Citing the example of cooperative dairy farms, Mr. Modi said that the overwhelming success story of dairy production in the country is only because of the freedom which it enjoys in terms of sale of its produce. He advocated for similar freedom for the farmers in the country, which he said is being guaranteed under the provisions of the new farm laws.
अच्छा करने के लिए अच्छे सुझावों के साथ, अच्छे सुधारों की तैयारी के साथ हम सबको आगे बढ़ना चाहिए। मैं आप सबको निमंत्रण देता हूं, आइए हम देश को आगे ले जाने के लिए, कृषि क्षेत्र की समस्याओं का समाधान करने के लिए आंदोलनकारियों को समझाते हुए हमने देश को आगे ले जाना होगा।
The Prime Minister said it is natural to witness differences whenever some revolutionary reform is introduced. Referring to similar agitations when the Green Revolution was implemented in the country, he thanked the undeterred belief of the former Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri, which he said led to the successful implementation of the game-changing reforms. The Prime Minister reassured everyone that minimum support price MSP will continue and the new farm laws do not undermine the APMC mandis in any way. He said that the budget this year has in fact laid special emphasis to modernize the APMC mandis.
मैं विश्वास दिलाता हूं कि मंडियां अधिक आधुनिक बने, अधिक प्रतिस्पर्धी होगी। इस बार बजट में भी उसके लिए हमने प्रावधान किया है। इतना ही नहीं, एमएसपी है, एमएसपी था, एमएसपी रहेगा।
The Prime Minister added that the affordable ration scheme benefiting over 80 crore people in the country will also continue. Mr. Modi called for a united approach in order to achieve the goal of alleviating grievances of small farmers. The Prime Minister welcomed constructive criticism of new ideas, but cautioned that perpetual obstruction of progressive reforms will deprive the farmers of their much-awaited rights. Highlighting the series of talks with the protesting farmers by the Agriculture Minister, he said the government is still open for further discussions to end the impasse. Showing concern for the elders at the protesting sites, Mr. Modi requested them to return home. The Prime Minister said that the farmers, especially from the state of Punjab, are being misguided in the agitation. Taking a dig at leaders who champion in mobilizing and misguiding people for protests, Mr. Modi said that the recent times have seen emergence of a new class of Andolan-Jeevi people who thrive only on agitations. Hinting at recent episodes of few foreign nationals being indulged in planned provocative actions, he cautioned everyone against foreign destructive ideologies, referring to them as the new form of FDIs in the country. Speaking about the country's fight against COVID, the Prime Minister lauded everyone's effort to make India stand out in its battle against the unknown enemy. He said the foreign investment in the country touched historic figures even when the world was reeling under the pandemic. He thanked the President for his address, which, he said, encompassed every aspect of the nation's gallant fight against coronavirus. Mr. Modi added that the challenges posed in the recent times have rekindled India's commitment to attain self-reliance. He said the country emerged as a pharmacy hub during the COVID phase, supplying life-saving drugs to over 150 countries. He added that soon after beginning the world's largest COVID vaccination program in the country, India started supplying vaccines to other countries as well. The Prime Minister said the effective handling of COVID pandemic is not a success of a party or individual, but is a success of the nation and should be celebrated as such. Reciting a poem adapted from the famous lines written by Hindi poet Maithili Sharan Gupta, the Prime Minister stressed on the need to overcome all challenges and adopt the vision of Atmanirbharta. Quoting lines about nationalism by Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, he urged countrymen to take pride in Indian culture, values and ethos. Mr. Modi said India is not only the world's largest democracy, but is also the mother of democracy.
Lok Sabha has taken up discussion on motion of thanks on the President's address to the joint sitting of both the houses of the Parliament. Participating in the discussion, senior Congress leader Adhir Ranjan Chaudhary raised several questions over the government's response towards the farmers' agitation against the farm laws. He alleged that the government is at war with the farmers and is trying to malign the farmers' agitation. Referring to farmers' protest on 26th of January, he demanded constitution of a joint parliamentary committee to find out the real conspirators. DMK leader T.R. Balu said the farming community must not be disturbed at any cost, but unfortunately the poor farmers are suffering on the outskirts of Delhi. Mr. Balu said all the three farm laws should be withdrawn without any delay. Earlier, resuming her speech, BJP member Locket Chatterjee praised the Narendra Modi government for its leadership during the COVID-19 pandemic. She said the government has taken several landmark steps like demonetization, introduction of GST and bringing farm laws for the welfare of the people. As the House met after its first adjournment at 5 p.m., Defence Minister Rajnath Singh urged the members of the Lok Sabha to continue discussion on motion of thanks on the President's address. He said it is the duty of every member to maintain the dignity of the House and this tradition must be maintained by the members. He said India has a healthy democracy and he is certain that every party wants to uphold it. Earlier, Lok Sabha was adjourned till 5 p.m. following opposition's uproar against the three farm laws. When the House met for the day this evening, members from several opposition parties trooped into the well raising slogans against the government and demanded to repeal the new farm laws. Lok Sabha Speaker Om Birla urged the agitating members to maintain order in the House and asked them to go back to their seats. Amid noisy scenes, the Speaker tried to run the question hour, saying that it is important in parliamentary democracy. As the pandemonium continued, the House was adjourned.
Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has said that the central government is governed by the principle of minimum government, maximum governance, and it presented the same philosophy through the Union Budget 2021-22. Ms. Sitharaman mentioned that the government has spent big on those areas of activity which give a big multiplier effect. Ms. Sitharaman said this in a virtual event demystifying Union Budget 2021-22, which was organized by the PhD Chamber of Commerce and Industry. She said the government is also taking steps to carefully monitor the fiscal deficit. She said the government has managed to make the Union Budget transparent, and whatever the government is borrowing or spending is open for everyone to see. The Finance Minister also mentioned that the government can give stimulus package to revive the economy. Union Health Ministry has said in the last 24 days, India has become the fastest country to reach the 6 million vaccination mark in the world. Addressing media in New Delhi, Additional Secretary in the Health Ministry, Dr. Manohar Agnani, said that USA took 26 days to reach the mark, while UK took 46 days to reach the mark of 6 million vaccinations.
Fastest country to reach 6 million vaccination target. USA did it in 26 days and UK in 46 days. 11 states have done more than 65% of healthcare workers coverage, but there are 11 states which have a coverage of less than 40% of their total healthcare workers database.
He also informed that so far 60,35,660 beneficiaries have been vaccinated for COVID-19 since the launch of the vaccination drive on the 16th of January. Out of them, 54,12,270 are healthcare workers and 6,23,390 beneficiaries are frontline workers. Mr. Agnani also informed that today vaccination sessions were organized in 35 states and union territories in which 2,23,298 beneficiaries were vaccinated.
So today the vaccination sessions were organized in 35 states and UTs, and the provisional figures which are available up to 6 p.m. All India beneficiaries who are vaccinated are 2,23,298. So the total hospitalizations till date are 29, and out of these 29, 19 have been discharged after treatment. One is under treatment, and there has been 9 deaths. In terms of hospitalization against percentage of vaccinations, it comes to 0.0005%. And there has been one new hospitalization, which is a case of bilateral facial palsy, which is stable at Kerala Institute of Medical Sciences, Thiruvananthapuram, Kerala.
Meanwhile, the country's COVID-19 recovery rate reached 97.20%, with the total recovery of more than 11,000 patients in the last 24 hours.
In Uttarakhand, relief and rescue operations are on in full swing in disaster-hit areas. The number of missing people has risen to 203 after many people were reported to be missing from nearby areas of Chamoli district following the glacier burst yesterday, which led to heavy flooding in Dhauli Ganga and Alaknanda rivers. Talking to media, Chief Minister Trivendra Singh Rawat today said that 20 bodies have been recovered so far. The state government has released 20 crore rupees for relief and rescue operations. Meanwhile, the Chief Minister reviewed disaster relief and rescue operations with senior officials in Dehradun. Union Education Minister Ramesh Pokhriyal Nishank and Energy Minister R.K. Singh visited the disaster-hit areas to assess the situation. Ration and relief supplies are being transported by helicopters to villages cut off from connectivity. Now we go live to our Dehradun correspondent Raghvesh Pandey for the update. Raghvesh, please tell us about the relief and rescue operations.
Information from Uttarakhand State Disaster Management Authority, Dehradun says that 26 bodies have been recovered so far. Meanwhile, Chief Minister reached disaster-affected area, Tapovan, this evening and reviewed the rescue operations. Tomorrow he will visit disaster-affected villages. Chief Secretary Om Prakash said the government intends to provide financial assistance to the families of the missing people, and SOP will be issued soon to decide its procedure. Yes?
Thanks, Raghvesh, for the update.
Secretary, Union Ministry of Labour and Employment, Apurv Chandra, has said that the government has proposed in the union budget to launch a portal which will collect information on building and construction workers, among others, and the work is on setting up of the portal by Directorate General of Labour Welfare. Speaking to media in New Delhi today, Mr. Chandra said it will help formulate health, housing, skill, insurance, credit and food scheme for the migrant workers. On the 4 labour codes, Mr. Chandra said the rule-making process is already underway and likely to be completed in the coming week.
Employer side, in depositing the provident fund deductions, then it will not be eligible for income tax benefits. And the second, which was not a part of the speech, was that any deposits in a provident fund, recognized provident fund under the 1925 Act, more than 2.5 lakhs, then the interest on that would attract income tax.
You are listening to the evening news on All India Radio.
Welcome back. Here is a review of proceedings in Parliament today. Searched from Rajya Sabha. Writer is Rajesh Ahuja of UNI. Prime Minister Narendra Modi today said that the government is taking all-out measures for the welfare of the poor and the farmers. He said Agriculture Minister Narendra Singh Tomar is in constant touch with the agitating farmers. Mr. Modi was replying to the discussion on the motion of thanks to the President's address to the joint session of Parliament in the Rajya Sabha. Later, the House adopted the motion by voice vote. Mr. Modi made it clear that minimum support price will continue. He said the new farm laws were aimed at improving the condition of small and marginal farmers. The Prime Minister said every party had promised farm reforms at some point of time. He said today 68% of farmers are small and marginal farmers and over 12 crore farmers have less than 2 hectares of land. Mr. Modi said that people who do politics have also implemented the laws in some form or the other. He said the government was ready for good suggestions and invited the opposition to take the country forward by explaining the good features to the farmers who are agitating. Talking about efforts by the BJP government to alleviate conditions of farmers, he said after 2014, the government transformed the crop insurance scheme to make it inclusive to small farmers. He said 90,000 crore rupees were disbursed through crop insurance. He said the NDA government is committed towards the welfare of the poor and listed some of the reforms undertaken by it to eradicate poverty. Earlier, Subrata Bakshi of the Trinamool Congress took oath of office. Several members raised the matters of public importance during the zero hour. Syed Zafar Islam of the BJP raised the issue of RBI recent guidelines on the NBFCs. Dr. Shantanu Sen of All India Trinamool Congress raised the issue of improper functioning of CoWIN app, which is designed to aid COVID vaccination. Kumar Ketkar of the Congress raised the issue of the new Parliament building. P. Wilson of DMK raised the issue of payment of pending arrears to sugarcane farmers in Tamil Nadu. Nawab Rabia of BJP demanded a separate civil services cadre for Arunachal Pradesh. Some members drew the attention of the chair to the flood fury in Uttarakhand and wanted a discussion. Responding to this, Chairman M. Venkaiah Naidu said there was need to wait for some time as rescue and rehabilitation measures were still going on. Mr. Naidu said the entire country is concerned. He said multiple agencies are working on rescue mission and the Home Ministry is looking into the tragedy. Mr. Naidu said the Prime Minister is reviewing the situation as well. Responding to questions on stubble burning contributing to pollution in Delhi, Environment Minister Prakash Javadekar said due to continued efforts by the government and burning of stubble was reduced by 25%. He said the stubble burning affects the national capital from October to November every year. The direction of the wind is such that it comes to Delhi and turns into smog. He said that 40,000 machines worth crores of rupees were given to states, but they are not being used properly. He said in Haryana, 25% less stubble burning was reported, but it increased to 25% in Punjab. In reply to another question, Mr. Zavarkar said that the suggestion to dedicate more funds for conservation of the red panda will not be an issue. Responding to questions on induction of Rafale fighter jets, Defence Minister Rajnath Singh said, a big delegation from France came during the induction ceremony of Rafale. In reply to another question, the minister said 11 Rafale aircraft have been delivered so far and the rest 17 will be delivered later. He said by April 2022, all Rafales will come to India. On questions by members wanting to know action on ceasefire violations by Pakistan on the border, Defence Minister Rajnath Singh said Pakistan uses ceasefire violations as a cover to infiltrate and exfiltrate terrorists at the border. The minister said ceasefire violations have increased because of the rise in infiltration activity from Pakistan. The minister said after Pakistan signed the ceasefire pact in 2003, ceasefire violations have gradually increased. He said over 4,600 ceasefire violations have occurred in 2020. After Pakistan signed the ceasefire pact in 2003, ceasefire violations have gradually increased. In all, 4,649 ceasefire violations have occurred in 2020, he said. After adoption of the motion of thanks on the President's address, Urban Development Minister Hardeep Singh Puri introduced the National Capital Territory of Delhi Laws, Special Provisions, Second Amendment Bill 2021 in the House. The bill replaces an ordinance. Thereafter, Minister of State for Home, Krishan Reddy, moved the Jammu and Kashmir Reorganization Amendment Bill 2021 for consideration and passing. This bill will also replace an ordinance. It seeks to replace ordinance to merge the Jammu and Kashmir cadre of IAS, IPS and Indian Forest Service with Arunachal Pradesh, Goa and Mizoram Union Territory cadre. Leader of Opposition Ghulam Nabi Azad initiated the debate on the bill. Opposing the bill, Azad recalled the government's assurance that statehood will be restored to Jammu and Kashmir.
And now, review of proceedings in Lok Sabha, writer Kumar Rakesh of the PTI. The Lok Sabha today resumed normal business after days of impasse following an appeal by Deputy Leader of the House and Defence Minister Rajnath Singh. Following an adjournment of nearly an hour after the House met at 4 p.m., the government and the opposition parties protesting over the farmers' issues reached an agreement at a meeting called by the Speaker, Om Birla. In his statement, Mr. Singh said it has been a long-held parliamentary tradition that takes up the discussion on the motion of thanks on the President's address to pass it. He appealed to all the members to maintain the norm. He said institutions should not be disrespected and asserted that the President and the Speaker are among the democratic institutions which should be respected. He noted that the Rajya Sabha had taken up the discussion and Prime Minister Narendra Modi replied to it today, following which the motion was passed. Mr. Singh said that members are free to speak on farm laws during the discussion. Adhir Ranjan Chaudhary of the Congress said his party members along with other opposition leaders wanted that the Lok Sabha take up a debate on the farmers' issues after President Ramnath Kovind's address to Parliament on the first day of the budget session. Mr. Chaudhary criticized the government's handling of the farmers' ongoing protests. Speaker Om Birla expressed his anguish as some members rushed to the well of the House, raising slogans and said this is not a good practice. He said the people of the country wanted the House to function normally without disruptions. Then the House took up discussion on the motion of thanks on the President's address. Thereafter, Loket Chatterjee of the BJP resumed her address. She hailed the Modi government's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic and noted that the recovery rate in the country has been more than 98%. She said Indian consignment of medicines and made-in-India vaccines to various countries received praise. They included countries like Morocco and Brazil. The member also hit out at the Trinamool Congress government of the West Bengal and accused it of renaming several central schemes for appropriating credit. She lashed out at the state government for denying the central government's programs like cash transfer to farmers and Ayushman Bharat, a health insurance scheme for the poor. The state government should take on the BJP in its political battle but not victimize people, she said. lauding Modi government's welfare measures like opening of bank accounts for the poor, providing them free ration for 8 months during the pandemic and several other measures. Ms. Chatterjee said it has stood for the poor. It has fulfilled people's dream by abolishing Article 370 in Jammu and Kashmir, she said. Participating in the debate on the motion of thanks on the President's address, Congress leader in Lok Sabha Adhir Ranjan Chaudhary also demanded an investigation by a joint parliamentary committee into the alleged TRP scam. DMK's T.R. Balu asked the government not to sit on prestige and meet the demand of the protesting farmers. BJP's Virendra Kumar lauded the government for its pro-poor measures during the pandemic and said it brought glory to the country. The discussion was continuing till the writing of the script. That's all in Parliament Review.
And now in some more news, Myanmar has been witnessing gradually escalating protests since the civilian government of Aung San Suu Kyi was removed by the military on 1st of February. During the last 3 days, the scale and intensity of the protest has increased. Here is a report from our special correspondent.
The protests against the military government in Myanmar continued today. It was the third consecutive day of protests in Myanmar. The protest has spread to new areas in the country. Protests are taking place from Yangon to Karen State, from the coastal city of Dawei in Tanin Thari region to Kachin state capital Myitkyina, among others. Today, the number of anti-government protesters was much bigger than the numbers on Sunday. People across Myanmar are demanding removal of the military government and release of detained leaders, including Aung San Suu Kyi. In the largest city of the country, Yangon, saffron-robed monks marched with workers and students to protest against the military rule. The protests are reported to be the biggest since the Saffron Revolution of 2007, led by the Buddhist monks. Apart from the monks, students, nurses and doctors, teachers and government employees at some places have also been taking part in the protests as part of civil disobedience movement against the military government. Police used water cannons to disperse the protesters at the capital city of Naypyidaw. But there have been no clashes or violent incidents in the country till now. Rajesh Jha for AIR News, Dhaka.
And now in some more sports news, in cricket, chasing a victory target of 420 runs set by England, India were 39 for 1 in the second innings at stumps on the 4th day of the first test match at M.A. Chidambaram Stadium in Chennai. Team India needs 381 more runs to win the test on a square turner track on the 5th and final day tomorrow. Earlier, England were all out for 178 runs in the second innings. For the host, Ravichandran Ashwin took 6 wickets, while Shehbaz Nadeem claimed 2. Pacer duo Jasprit Bumrah and Ishant Sharma bagged 1 wicket each.
A study has shown that reduced industrial discharge during 51 days of mandated COVID-19 nationwide lockdown decreased the dissolved heavy metal concentrations in the Ganga River by a minimum of 50%. The study was conducted by a team of scientists from the Indian Institute of Technology, Kanpur. Now let us take a look at the weather forecast for tomorrow. National capital Delhi is likely to experience moderate fog. The temperature will hover between 9 and 25 degrees Celsius. Mumbai will have mainly clear skies. The minimum temperature will be around 20, while the maximum will be around 35 degrees. Chennai will witness fog in the morning and partly cloudy skies later. The temperature will vary between 20 and 31 degrees Celsius. In Kolkata, there will be fog in the morning and mainly clear skies later. The city will observe a minimum of around 14 and a maximum of around 27 degrees. Srinagar will have partly cloudy skies, becoming generally cloudy towards afternoon or evening or night. The temperature will hover between 0 and 9 degrees Celsius. Jammu will witness mainly clear sky, becoming partly cloudy towards evening or night. Minimum temperature will be around 8 and the maximum around 21 degrees Celsius.
And now, before we end the bulletin, the headlines once again. Prime Minister Narendra Modi asserts new farm laws aim to fulfill aspirations of small and marginal farmers in the country. Prime Minister assures that minimum support price and APMC mandis will continue. Says government is still open for further discussion to end the impasse. Lok Sabha takes up discussion on motion of thanks on President's address. Relief and rescue operations in full swing in disaster-hit areas of Uttarakhand. And in cricket, India need 381 more runs to win Chennai Test against England with 9 wickets in hand on last day tomorrow. For details of these stories and more, log on to our website www.newsonair.com and News on AIR app. And with that, we end the evening news. Good night.